Hi, my name's Amanda and today I'm going to be showing you how to make this purse. Call me old-fashioned, but I still like to carry around my credit card and some change and some notes. I'm not a pay on my phone kind of girl. So this is perfect. So you've got a zip pocket, you can put your change in, and then another pocket there you can put your credit card or your notes in. And it fastens with a popper. One thing to tell you that the thread I have used, it matches the bias, because that is the only place that you're going to see it. So make sure whatever colour you choose for your bias, you use a corresponding thread. The only other time you see it is when you top stitch here. So just a little top tip there. All your measurements are in your cutting guide, which is in the PDF, and then you need to gather all your tools. I've got my sewing machine set up ready here, and my iron is all ready to go as well. So let's begin. So if you haven't got pre-cut bias, I'm going to show you how to make it. You're going to lie your fat quarter down with your selvage at this end, and everything else is nice and straight along these two other edges. You're going to get your ruler, the bigger the ruler the better, because it's just easier to cut, and find your 45-degree line. So that's this one here, and you want to place that on this bottom edge. Right, so that is going to be straight along the bottom edge of your fabric, and it's this angle that we are going to cut at. So you can place it wherever. As obviously the further into your fabric, the bigger piece a strip of bias you're going to cut in one go, but you might have to move your ruler up because obviously it won't be as long as your fabric. But that doesn't matter. But so first of all then, line your 45-degree line, which is there on the bottom edge of your fabric here. You're going to take your rotary cutter and we're going to cut up there. So you might just have to excuse my hands because I'm going to go in front of the camera there. Oh, that don't want to go. I'm going to have to just come over the top, excuse me. That's it. I'm going to just slide my ruler up and cut a nice big length. Then you can choose either side, but we're going to mark 1.5 inches we want. So that's 4 centimetres, 1.5 inches. Either side, it doesn't matter. I think I'm going to stick to this side. So I'm going to mark 1.5 inches in and then make another cut, and that will be our bias. So I'm just going to mark 1.5 inches from that first line. Again, move my ruler up another 1.5 inches, and then I'm just going to rotary cut it up there, and then that will be my piece of bias. I'm then going to do the same again, so I'm probably going to go this side this time and do 1.5 inches on that side, and again cut up, because I'd rather have two pieces to join together than we've got a long enough piece than not have a big enough piece when we come to use it at the end. So go ahead and cut out 2 pieces of bias binding 1.5 inches or 4 centimetres wide. So the next thing is to join our 2 bias pieces together. So I've got one strip going this way and the other one going that way, and just laid on top of each other like that. You will have 2 little ears sticking out at the end. Don't worry about that, that's perfectly fine. So we are going to sew down here with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've just marked mine on with my chalk pencil, just so I know that I've got my needle in the correct place. So I'm going to start right up there, so I'll be off the end of the one underneath, and I will come off the end again at this end. So I'm going to go and stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance down there. Remember to back tack at the beginning and the end, and that joins your pieces together. So this is what it's going to look like. Don't worry that they don't quite match, because when we do it, that's going to go on the inside, so you won't see that anyway. So you can just cut your little ears off, and then we can put this to one side for the moment and carry on with our main part of the purse. So once you've cut out all your pieces, the next thing is to interface them all. So you want to place your fabric with the right side down, wrong side facing up, and get your piece of interfacing wadding Decovil, whichever you are using. You can normally feel that one side is a bit rough, and that is your glue side, and it normally tends to be a bit shiny. So you want to place that down like that. Get your iron, set it to the temperature that is appropriate for what interfacing you're using. This is my lightweight interfacing, so I want my iron to be quite hot but not on full maximum. So don't put it on cotton setting, because sometimes that can shrink your interfacing. So I've got it on medium, shall we say, and you just want to press. So you're going to hold it for about 10-15 seconds and then move along. So we're not ironing like we're ironing, we are pressing. Make sure you get right up to the corners and just go ahead and interface all your pieces. If you are using Decovil or wadding, you can afford to have your iron a little bit hotter, as long as you've got 100% cotton material. If you are only using poly cotton, for instance, then you need to keep your iron quite cool, otherwise your actual fabric will shrink. So just set your iron to whatever temperature is appropriate for the fabric and the interfacing that you are using, and go ahead and do all your pieces. So now it's time to start sewing. I've got my main piece of fabric with my correct side facing up, and my zip, which I'm going to turn teeth side down. Just place it on. Don't worry that it's got the overhangs, because we're going to chop that off later. I'm just going to clip or pin that in place, whichever you prefer. And then I have changed my foot on my machine to my zipper foot, and I'm going to stitch this in place. Now, if you look on your zip, you'll see that there's some little lines on there. So hopefully, if I stitch down that groove on this side and that groove on the other side, my seams should be the same distance apart. You might not be able to see that there, but if you look at your zip, you'll have two lines, and that is where I'm going to stitch. So I'm going to stitch down this edge first of all. Remember, back tack at the beginning and the end, and stitch your zip in place along this edge. I'm going to take my pocket piece, place it right sides together, matching up all your edges, and again clip or pin that in place, whichever you prefer. And we are going to stitch this in place. Now I am going to turn mine over, and I'm going to stitch it down that line. So I'm going to stitch this in place along that line on this side, so I can see exactly where I'm going. This is what we look like at the moment. So we're going to open that out, flip it to the back, give this a press. So you want to pull that down, pull this down, give that a nice press along there, and then we are going to top stitch along here. Now I have got the thread in my bobbin that matches my binding. So obviously that's going to go on there and going to be quite a contrast. If you didn't want that to be a contrast, then you need to change your top stitch thread to whichever colour your outer fabric is. I don't mind mine being contrasting. Let's hope it's going to be straight though. So that's what I'm going to just leave that in. But if you want to change yours to match this, then go ahead. But give it a press and then top stitch along here. Remember, back stitch at the beginning and the end. And I'm going to use a stitch length of 4. So now we're going to flip our pocket up and match it up to the other end of the zip. So again, make sure your sides are all in line, and we are going to sew down here. So I'm just going to clip that in place. To the edge of the zip. So make sure it's on the edge here and your sides are straight there. And now we are going to sew down here. So again, remember, back stitch at the end and at the beginning, and we're back to our normal stitch length. I use a 2.5, but whatever you prefer. Some people prefer a bit smaller, some people prefer a bit bigger, but just a regular stitch length along this line here. And remember, I'm going to try and get on that line on my zip, so hopefully it'll all be nice and neat. So we're now going to take our lining piece, lie it right sides together, again matching the ends where your zip is and your two sides. Clip them or pin them in place, whichever you prefer. I'm just going to move that out of the way. That's the advantage of having a longer zip to start with. You don't have to worry about getting round the zipper pull. And again, I'm going to flip it over and stitch on that line. So remember, back tack at the beginning of the end. So we're going to stitch down here just along that line. So we're going to flip this open and pull that back. So this time your two ends will meet here, and then we'll have a little bit of your lining showing there. So give that a good press, and we are going to top stitch along here. So the same distance you did there. Let's have a see what I measured. I just used my width of my foot, so that's 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to measure 1/8 of an inch, again just the width of my zipper foot, and I'm going to top stitch along here using a stitch length of 4. Remember, back tack at the beginning of the end, but give that a nice good press first of all, and then top stitch along there. Now you can, if you want to, also top stitch from this edge. So again, measure the same in. So I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch. And so I'm going to have 2 lines. You don't have to if you don't want to, just a little bit more decorative. So I'm going to top stitch from this end. Remember, if you do, back tack beginning on the end. So next thing we need to do is move our zip. So pull your pull so it's in the middle of your purse, and then you can chop off your excess zip. Use your scissors or your rotary cutter, whichever you prefer. Then the next thing we're going to do is baste our edges. So we're starting here, all the way down, across and back up. I'm going to do it in my seam allowance, so that's, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance and probably stitch at a 3, because you are only tacking it. It doesn't have to be properly stitched, if that makes sense. So I'm going to start there, back tack, 1/4 inch seam allowance, stitch length of 3, all the way around the 3 sides and finishing back here. But make sure you've opened your zip, otherwise if your pull's still up there, you won't be able to get it back. Another thing I like to do is actually mark my corners, because I think sometimes when you're going along, you're not quite sure where to stop and where to pivot. So I like to put a little cross in the corner. So I've marked a 1/4 inch up and a 1/4 inch in, and I know that when I get to that central point, that is where I need to stop and pivot. So I've done that on my both bottom corners. Just a little tip if you get a bit stuck. Just be careful when you're coming up to your teeth. You want to just hold them in place. Just watch your fingers, just to catch them closed. That's it. And then remember, back tack at the top. There we go. So you've got your zip at this side. You're just going to turn your purse over, and from this end we are going to measure up 7.5 centimeters or 3 inches. And just give that a mark. I'm just going to draw a couple of lines on there, and then our zip end we're going to fold back so the top here is along our lines, and just put some clips or pins along the sides. Let's make sure it's straight. Just give that another measure and just readjust if you need to. So we want 3 inches. And that's it. Shove that down a bit. And now we are going to sew our purse bit together. So again, from the top here, so the top of that pocket there, you can go along your previous line from before. We're going to stitch from that top edge there to the bottom of our purse here on both sides. Again, you can still use a 3 stitch length because we are just catching it in. So sew again over the top of the line we've just done there to fasten down our 2 sides. Remember, back tack at the beginning and the end. So now we're going to curve off our corners. If you choose something quite small, it can be quite tricky to get your bias round. So I've got quite a big bowl here. Its diameter is approximately 4 inches, 10 centimetres. So you're going to line up the edge of your bowl with your stitching. So you want it to, let me just grab that, to be on the edge of the stitching here, coming round to the edge of the stitching there, just however it fits. So I'm just going to put it on and line it up there and up here. So I've got quite a big semicircle there, and I'm just going to draw around it. So if you use a smaller circle, it can be a bit tricky to get your bias round. So same on the other side. Just going to line it up so the edge of my bowl hits that stitching here, and wherever the edge of my bowl hits the stitching there, that is where I'm going to draw. And now I'm going to sew along those 2 curved edges that we've just drawn. So I'm going to sew along there with a stitch length of 3, still the same because this is still all in our seams. Sew along there, remember, back tack at the beginning and the end, and sew along those 2 curved edges. So now we need to fold it in 2. Just line up your sides and your top. I'm just going to put a clip in down here and a clip up there, and we're going to chop this off. So we're going to keep the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance going up there. So if you want to measure it, you can do. I think I will to start with. Actually, I might use my blue pen and it's not all mingling in together. So I'm going to cut that off just round there, keep an 1/8 of an inch, then it's the same as the seam allowance here. So this is what our purse looks like now. So we can set that to the side for the moment and go and grab your bias binding. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit better. So I've just chopped my ends off so they're straight. And we want to make this now into bias. So we're going to fold it in half. First of all, do this at your ironing board and you're going to press all the way along and fold it in half. And then you're going to take this edge here and you're not going to quite go to the middle. It's literally a little smidge of a gap. So you're going to fold both ends in so it's going to look something like that. So you've got a tiny weeny gap in the middle. So they're not butting up against each other and they're certainly not overlapping. You've got the tiny, tiny little gap in the middle. And that is how you're going to iron it. So go to your ironing board and do that with your bias. Chop one end off first of all, and then we can chop the other end off when we know how long it needs to be. Where your joint is, you just want to iron those seams open if you haven't done them already, and then you can chop the little ears off. So now we're ready to attach our bias. So you're going to flip your purse over and we're working from the back. I've just cut that end straight and I've marked 1 inch there, and I'm just going to leave that overhanging, and we're just going to put lots and lots of clips in. When you come to the curved edges, it just happens. It's really quite magic. Just take your time, put lots and lots of clips in, and then when you get to the other end, you just want to, again, leave yourself a tail of about 1 inch hanging over the edge. So just chop that off at the other end as well. So you've got 1 inch overhang on both ends. But your bias, it's magic. It just goes round those corners. So take your time, lots and lots of clips. and say chop the end off so you have an inch overhanging at the other end as well, just like that. So now we're ready to stitch our bias. So we're going to start at this end, go all the way around and come back to here. I'm just going to pick this up and show you where we are stitching. So if you can see that fold there, we're going to be stitching in that fold all the way around. When it gets to your corners, just take your time, be very careful, and it should just happen. So stitch all the way around in that first fold there. Remember to back tack at the beginning and the end, and just use your regular stitch length. Mine is a 2.5. So I'm coming up to my first corner. If you need to stop, remember to stop with your needle down. But if you just need to adjust, just sort of pull it out of the way a bit, just go nice and slowly. Always stop with your needle down. Take the next clip out. Just give it a bit of a pull there. Lift your foot up if you need to. So just take it nice and easy round the corner. Slower you go, the neater it should be. One down, one to go. And this is what we should look like now. So we want to flip it all over to the other side. And first of all, we want to deal with our edges. So we want to fold that in, and we want to fold that in, and then fold that bit in too. And then that is coming over here. Oh, first time. So just make sure that you haven't got any little ends sticking out there. If you have, just sort of give them a bit of a tuck. That's it. We want a nice neat bottom there. Get a clip in quick before it moves. So what you want to do is fold it on that fold, and then it will come over, just over your stitching, just like that, and give it a clip. So it should just come just over your stitching. So go ahead and pull it round. If it just doesn't do, like mine isn't just doing there, just make sure you've pulled it far enough over, because sometimes it just doesn't come over just far enough. So give it a tug from the other side and just fold it over. It's just about going to go there. There we go. You can always just give it a bit more of a press and it will happen. If it really doesn't come over and you can still see quite a bit of stitching, you can just trim that seam allowance down a little bit, which will give you a bit more wiggle room. But normally if you give it a good tug over, it should literally just cover. So you want to go ahead and do all that all the way around, and remember to fold that end in as well, and then we're going to stitch it from this side. So on this curve, mine doesn't want to come over to meet and cover my stitches, so I'm going to fold my bias back. In fact, I'm going to turn it over and cut it from that side, and I'm going to trim that down ever so slightly. It's midgy smidge, and that will just make it cover. There we are, that much, and that will make all the difference, that when you pull your bias round, it will work this time. But please make sure that you pull it out of the way, and you're better off doing it from the back. There you go, you see, it'll do it now. That's better. So we're all clipped in place, so now we want to stitch this down. Now if you wanted to stitch it by hand, you could do, but I'm going to machine it, so I need to machine it about here. So you don't want to be right up to the edge because then you might miss the underneath part. But I'm going to go, it's probably about an 1/8 really from the end there. So hopefully that should also catch the other side. Now, if you were being very, very good, what really should happen is your stitch that you stitch on this side should really be in that ditch in there. I don't think mine's going to be that precise, but that's if you were really clever and you were really, really careful. That's really where you should be hitting on the other side. But I'm not bothered if you can see my stitching on that back bit. So I'm going to stitch at about 1/8 of an inch, and hopefully that should catch both sides. So off we go. So I'm ready to sew. I've made sure I've got my end tucked in nicely. I'm right near the edge, but obviously not too far across. It's just a bit hit and miss. Let's go. I'm going to do a few stitches, and then when I get up to about here, turn it over and let's see what's happening on the other side. Remember to back tack at the beginning and at the end. Ooh. There we go. It's going to turn over. Let's have a look on the other side what's going on. Oh yes, we're there. That'll do. That'll do nicely. So just take your time going around the corners. Make sure that your bias is covering your stitches. You can always readjust as you go along. Just take your time and I'll see you back round at the other end. So there we go. This is what we should look like now. All my bias is caught in on both sides and I'm happy with that. So all we need to do now is put our popper on. So I'm just going to fold that down, give it a measure. So mine measures 6 inches across. So that's nice and handy. 3 inches up. Oh, it's just where that little spot is. That's quite handy there, isn't it? So grab your poppers. So remember, you've got 2 with the flat shiny discs and the points. And then you've got 1 each that look like that. And we're going to put our popper in. So get your tool and remember whereabouts it needs to go. Just have a look before you decide. So mine's going to go there and I'm going to use this bright pink one, of course. So I'm going to go just above that spot about there. So I've only got the lid at the moment. Oh, I've only got the flap even, shall we call it. I've only got the flap of my purse and we're going to poke my tool just through the flap. And then if you pull it down, you remember you only want to go through the pocket. So I'm just going to look whereabouts that is on the underneath there. Oh, and that's handy, isn't it? Right in the middle of that red spot. So if you didn't have a mark as handy as mine, where yours is going to be, if you want to just give it a mark with a chalk pencil, just on the underneath, because remember on this side you only want to go through the pocket. So unzip your zip and you're only going to go through the pocket. So mine is where that red spot is. So I want to just undo that. Be very careful you don't stab yourself, but you're only going through the pocket. You can see there. So I'm going to take one of my flat ones and that's going through from that side. Let's give it a push on. That might take you a while because you're going through a few layers. If you might need to just make your hole a little bit bigger. Sometimes they just disappear. That's better. So a flat one inside the pocket. That's it. And take whichever one you want. I think I'm going to go that one on that side there. Shove it on. Let's give it a push on. and then get your popper tool. So your black flat part is going on the big flat part of your popper. So it's going inside like that. The other one sits on top. Before you actually press, just make sure, give it one good final look that everything is where it should be. I know it's a bit harder on the inside, but make sure you've not got it hanging over anywhere and it looks like it's all nicely caught in there. And then give it a press. Moment of truth when you take it away. Oh, phew. Sometimes it can be a bit tricky. And then same on the other side. So on your outer pocket, you want the flat bit. Just push that in. And then sticking out that way. Again, push it on. This one's a bit easier to see. So you want the flat against the flat there. And just line it up before you actually commit to that final press. Give it a squash down. And there we go. Make sure it pops. Hey! And there we have our purse. How fancy does that look? Thank you for watching. Can't wait to see them all. Remember to share them on our Facebook page. Always Knitting and Sewing. Knit it, stitch it, share it. Thanks very much for watching and joining with me.